Play different. Warning. The following video contains rapid flashing colors and/or strobing.
Greetings, smart and attractive people of the internet. In this video, we're looking at Unicycle, a classic freeware game from Brian Kendall, originally released back in 1997. Now, this game may look like it fell off the back of a turnip truck, and some of you may be asking, was this made by a 13-year-old or something? And the answer would be yes. Kendall made this back when he was in the 7th grade, which really makes me reconsider how I spent my youth. And yes, it may look simplistic, but appearances can be deceiving, because Unicycle is one of the most delightfully fun games on the Macintosh. So what does this game entail? Well, you're cast as a cheerful clown as he rides his unicycle over randomly generated terrain, which increasingly fluctuates in height with each level. The nameless but joyful clown will also ride just a little bit faster every time a new level is reached. To beat a level, the perky clown must reach a certain score by collecting smiley faces, with the larger ones being worth more points. They must also hop over pits and not trip over brick walls which for some reason were built all over these hills. Should the happy clown meet the score target before a bonus timer runs out, they are thrust into a bonus level which cranks the game up to ludicrous speed, with colours flashing like a rave within a rave within a rave. And yes, this is why I put a flashing warning at the start of this video. In the game's original release, it was controlled with a single button to jump, with the height of the leap being controlled with how long the button is pressed. In later versions, buttons to speed up and slow down were added, in addition to a specific high jump button, though you could revert back to the single button controls, which kept the game accessible to many people. And as in many arcade games, there is no end goal, just to try to attain a high score before you run out of lives. Okay, but why is this game so fondly remembered? Well, for one, it's a damn fun time. The game itself is incredibly simplistic, but this helps give it an addictive quality, on top of it just feeling good to play. Controlling the height of your jump feels good, using heels to launch into the air feels good, collecting a cluster of smiley faces feels good, and pulling off a near miss with a brick wall feels good. The game may look janky as heck, but it's simply a joy to play. The other huge factor of this game's appeal is the mood. It's just so darn cheerful and goofy, with a big smile on that clown's face as he waves his arms in the air like he just doesn't care, with the vistas in the background and the goofy sound effects. Plus, it has one of the cheeriest, catchiest game tunes of all time, which is lodged into the back of the head of every person who has ever played it. Even when you start to die repeatedly due to the increasingly hazardous terrain and high speeds, it's more funny than frustrating because of how ridiculous it becomes. It's simply what I would call a quote-unquote feel-good game. There is even split-screen multiplayer action for 2 to 4 players, with 5 different modes on offer, even if some feel very similar to others. Poking around the game's innards with ResEdit will reveal some secrets, such as messages Kendall left for explorers, which eventually devolves into a recreation of a Monty Python skit. He also reveals some codes that can be used in the game, such as a level select, which will give you silly messages if you put in silly numbers, and a music selection screen which includes a bonus track called the Guy Gizmo theme. Guy Gizmo was a character in an unfinished book Kendall was working on. I actually didn't know about these secrets until recently, and I owe it to the cutting room floor for letting me know about them. Unicycle sprang from a terrain generator Kendall built on a whim after learning about algebra and slopes in math class, and he then threw some gameplay on top of it. It all came together very organically and quickly. In fact, the first version was completed in less than a week. As an aside, if you're interested in looking at the terrain generator, it was recently recovered along with its source code and posted on the Macintosh Garden and Macintosh repository. As for the game's jolly disposition, Kendall says he's always thinking about mood when he creates something. It wasn't as much of a conscious thing back when he was 13, but he says he was still definitely thinking about it. And since he's always enjoyed wacky, goofy humour, he went in that direction when he, quote, slapped Unicycle together. When it came to the music, Kendall started piano lessons at the age of 8 and has been composing music for as long as he can remember, and in fact, continues to do so today. All of the music for Unicycle are original pieces, though the main theme that is most remembered started out as a song he wrote independently of the game. He later used it in the game because it seemed so appropriate, especially with the Super Mario Bros. Style intro. As a 13-year-old, Kendall unsurprisingly had little experience with the rave scene or psychedelic imagery, so neither were an influence on the bonus levels. He can't remember exactly what he was going for, but certainly something colourful and fun, because hey, it's a bonus level. Bonus levels should feel like a party, right? Just in this case, it's one of those parties where you eventually need to find a quiet corner to hide in. It's also important to note that Kendall programmed it on an old 68K Mac, and being young and inexperienced, didn't make sure the frame rates were consistent across computers. So when people played Unicycle on a Power Mac, for example, the graphics rendered much faster and the bonus levels became much more intense than Kendall originally intended. One thing many people have noticed is how well Unicycle would work on phones. Kendall of course has realised this himself and says he feels a little bit silly for not remaking it. He even says he has ideas on how to make it more modern and fun, but of course, it all comes down to finding time for it, and at the moment, he's focused on other projects. A direct sequel was actually in the works back in 1999, called Unicycle 2: The Multicycle. While the core gameplay was going to be similar to the original, it was to feature enemies, bosses, much more optimized code, and actual level design, rather than only random generation. In fact, there were to be 40 levels. Eventually Kendall started work on another game called Gobbledygooks, and Unicycle 2 fell to the wayside. Neither game was finished, though a demo of Gobbledygooks was released and has been recovered. Unicycle 2 had a lot of work done on it, but sadly Kendall lost the more developed versions, and all he has left is a barely working prototype, which he isn't happy enough with to share. He does still have all the music he composed for it, which has now been shared publicly. There is also a Unicycle 3D, which started back in 2001. Like with the original, it all started with a terrain generator, this time one to make 3D landscapes, but it didn't get far due to how complex working with 3D technology was at the time. He still had a little prototype up and running, which he thought he had lost. Luckily, he has recovered it and rebuilt it to work on modern Macs, and this has been shared along with the source code. In regards as to why he had so many unreleased games, he says it was because he had yet to learn how to actually finish projects. Though Brian Kendall may be most fondly remembered for Unicycle on the Mac, he's much more famous on the internet at large for his flash animation, The Demented Cartoon Movie, which hit a meme status, at least by 2002 standards. He still occasionally meets people in real life that saw the movie independently of any interaction with him, which almost never happens with Unicycle. On the other hand, he receives more emails about Unicycle now than he does about TDCM, so it would seem the game is enduring a little longer. As for where Kendall is now, he now programs professionally, but still works on his little side projects to exercise the creativity he's had since he was young, including to continue composing music. He's even composed professionally a few times too. And that's the story of Unicycle, a game originally made in a week by a 13-year-old that has managed to remain in the hearts and minds of those who played it years later. And it still feels as joyful and freeing today to hop on your Unicycle, don your makeup, and ride over those hills, to feel the wind blow your hat back as the ocean shimmers in the distance. Sure, just like in real life, sometimes you'll hit a brick wall and you'll trip up, but you just have to hop back onto that Unicycle and keep on going. And that's my message to you, dear viewers. That's my message to you.